Are you interested in your children being winners and leaders in the future? Well, how are you going to get there? One of the things that I think you should focus on is teaching your children to think, teaching them to focus in a sustained manner. And the way that you do that effectively is you make certain that they are cultivating the power of attention from a very early age. What I try to aim for is that about 80% of my children's time in education is spent in self-education with long-form narrative books. Now, that's not to say there's not a great place for some useful apps and other activities. There is. I use those. But 80% of the time, your children's education should come from long-form narrative books. And I would suggest to you that you do this even with subjects such as math. This is why I am such a fan of Life of Fred. Life of Fred is a curriculum that I bought for all my children, and then I wound up buying the company. And I want to sell you Life of Fred math books. If you want to use Life of Fred math books as your number one go-to math curriculum, I think that's a great idea. Life of Fred has helped thousands and thousands of children to go from math haters to math lovers and be high math achievers as a standalone curriculum. You could also use Life of Fred as a supplementary curriculum. If your children are doing a great job in school and they have a great math teacher and they're using some other curriculum, wonderful. If you're using a math app that is doing a good job and teaching lessons, great. But make certain that your children can follow a chain of argument, a thread, even in difficult subjects like math. If you are interested in getting some Life of Fred math books for your children, go to lifeoffred.com, lifeoffred.com, order directly there with free shipping, lifeoffred.com. Give them a try, and I think you'll find out why I'm such a fan.
Welcome to Radical Personal Finance. My name is Joshua Sheets, and I'm your host. Today on the podcast, I want to share with you some ideas about what I'm thinking of as my human-scaled productivity system. These are some ideas that, if you're anything like me, and I know that you are, otherwise you wouldn't be here listening, these are some ideas that I think will be helpful to you because they've been helpful to me to try to stem the tide, the difficulties of the moment we're in, and stay focused on what really matters, which is the human experience and our individual and group human accomplishment. We are living in a day and age where our experience of life is unprecedented in human history. It is absolutely unprecedented. The sheer volume of ideas, of arguments, of content that comes across our brain, comes across our feed, comes across our screens in the current moment is absolutely unprecedented. Some of it is outright harmful and destructive. If you're anything like me, you've eliminated as much of the harmful and destructive stuff as you can, and you've done that proactively. But that doesn't mean that you still know what to do with it, because every single day, every single week, we face some new, dramatically transformative set of information, tools, something that is changing. This week I just finished up the second session of the AI Productivity Mastery course that I hosted with Gabriel Custodiet and Urban. And what I was reflecting on, even as we delivered that second session, was how much things have changed in about 2 months since we originally planned this particular event. When we sat down and we laid out our outline of ideas of what we were going to cover, I had a pretty good idea of what it would be. But during the time that we were preparing for that class, the tools changed so substantially that we had to go back and adjust some of the outline because the tools had leveled up significantly. And that's just a current reminder of what it is. The problem is that these changes are not all for the good. Many of them are for the good, but they're not all for the good. And I find it extremely easy to fall prey to the massive fire hose of information and of ideas coming down into my life. And I'm so pinned down by the fire hose of ideas that I can't actually get the things done that matter. And this has led me to, in essence, what I think of as a dual-fold strategy. Now, I'm a big fan of this concept of the dual extreme strategy. I think of it sometimes with the barbell strategy. If you're familiar with the barbell strategy of investing, the basic idea is you want to have a lot of your investments at the left end that are extremely safe, extremely conservative, extremely boring. And then you want to have some of your investments at the very right end, at the far end, that are exceedingly risky, exceedingly risky. But if they work really, really big. And the barbell strategy says you want to minimize that stuff in the middle, and you want to just focus on these two extremes. I think this is an extremely useful concept, and I think it's useful in terms of productivity. And it's more and more what I find myself doing in my own life. On the left end of the barbell, I'm going back as much as I can to the old ways, to a discarding of technology, to a discarding of modern tools, and focusing on the analog, the slow, the laborious, because there's enormous value in the left end. And then on the right end, I'm going as hard as I can towards the implementation of some of the most extreme technologies, some of the most innovative and cutting edge. And I'm trying to skip the two things in the middle. Now, let me explain what the implementation of this looks like. And I want to give 3 examples to discuss. The first thing that has been really good for me has been to increasingly get rid of my phone. And in order to do that, I have settled on a strategy of using an Apple Watch as a second phone. If you're not aware, I'm sure you are aware, excuse me. As I'm sure you are aware, our phones are one of the most powerful tools that we have. I consider the owning and the use of a modern smartphone not in any way a luxury. I do not agree when a boomer comes along and says, well, these kids these days, they go out and have $1,000 phone, and that's ridiculous. I do not consider a $1,000 phone a luxury. I consider a $1,000 phone a necessity because of what it can do and what it can accomplish. If I did not have an expensive flagship phone, one of the first things I would do would be to go and get an expensive flagship phone, because the absolute utility of that device is greater than almost anything else. That device is one of the most important devices that you can possibly have. And I think it is a necessary tool for a high productivity person. The problem with the phone, however, is that while it is exceedingly useful and exceedingly convenient and exceedingly important, it is also exceedingly disruptive and exceedingly harmful and exceedingly frustrating, because everything is right there. Everything is at your fingertips. Now, people over the years have worked on this in different ways. So there are many people who will say, well, you should just have a dumb phone. And I have tried that. I have, in the past, had a dumb phone. I have enjoyed having a dumb phone. I've enjoyed the usefulness I've enjoyed the mental freedom of not being chained to a phone. And so I've had various versions of a dumb phone. What has happened over the years is it's actually gotten very, very difficult to find a true dumb phone. And this happens because it used to be you could purchase a number of dumb phones that were on the 2G and 3G networks, but those have all been phased out. A few months ago, I wanted to purchase a dumb phone for part of my family's phone portfolio. And I went out and I searched the marketplace and I looked very, very carefully. I found one option that would work. I went ahead and purchased it, and I'm holding it here in my hand, and I scoured all the listings. And when it showed up, unfortunately, what I discovered was it was not actually a dumb phone. It was a smartphone. It's a flip phone with the old-fashioned numbers on it, but it is still a smartphone and has all of the smartphone stuff on it. And I thought, man, I can't even find a workable dumb phone in today's market. That's astonishing. Now, I know they're out there. I know that I could have tried harder. I could have gone and gotten something else. But this was it was a genuine, sincere effort to find one. I thought I had found one that would work and that would be good, and it turns out that even the one that I chose and had shipped to me wasn't actually a dumb phone. So you see a number of people that have tried other issues, other things. There's a light phone, and there have been a number of different devices that people have tried to have to solve these problems. And I've played around with some of these, but very rarely had any great success. You say, well, Joshua, what about just removing all the stuff from the phone? And I have done that on many occasions. I've taken YouTube off, I take X off, I take all the stuff off the phone. And that usually lasts for about a week or two. It's a great week or two where I have the phone without the stuff, and I'm really happy about it. But then there's some kind of thing that happens, right? There's some bit of research that I'm trying to do, and but I can't do research because I don't have YouTube on my phone, or I can't get this thing done, I can't get this information that I want because I don't have X on my phone. And can I log in from the phone? Yes, I can log in from the phone on the browser, and I can do it in that way. So there's always a workaround. There are things there, but in many ways, it just is a frustrating experience. And so then I wind up putting the apps back on there, and then I wind up, for a couple of weeks I ignore them. Then a couple of weeks later, I pop it open one time while I'm bored, and then I'm sucked into it again. And I go through these basically month-long cycles where I'm up and I'm down, and I'm up and I'm down, and it's these stupid emotional frustrations that come. And I can see the fact that this thing is harming me, but I can also argue the other side that this thing is really important for me. So that has not worked. So finally, I went ahead and I decided that the best way to do this is with an Apple Watch with cellular connection. And so I finally implemented this last month. I went and bought I've used an Apple Watch for a long time, but my previous versions of an Apple Watch, I didn't want the cellular connection because I didn't want the data tracking. And I thought, I don't want this thing on my wrist tracking me all the time, so I'll get the Wi-Fi version. And I did that, but I was always frustrated by not having the ability to walk away from the phone, because if you have a Wi-Fi watch, you can't have the ability to walk away. So I finally went and I bought an Apple Watch Ultra with a cellular connection about a month ago, and I set it up. And this has been exactly what I needed. It has been the thing that has separated me, allowed me to separate from the phone physically. And so what I now do is, because one more thing, again, I'm sure you probably also have had this experience, right? You want to leave your phone somewhere else. You want to leave it in the kitchen. You want to leave it in the office. You want to leave it somewhere else. But then you worry, what if somebody needs to get a hold of me? And this does happen on occasion, right? I did have some time back, I had an emergency call that came in the middle of the night. And because the person was able to call a couple times, it turned the phone off of sleep mode. I was able to get through, and I was able to take the emergency call. And it actually would have been a significant problem had I not had the device available to me. And you probably don't have a home phone, so just like many of us don't at this point in time. And so it's a maddening set of circumstances. But then the problem is, if I have the phone with me, I'm always distracted by it. And I'm distracted by it in the moments when I most don't want to do it, right? If something's cooking off and I'm monitoring the situation and I'm sitting at my dinner table with my children, there's such an intense desire to say, well, I got to slip in the other room and check X real quick and see what's happening and follow the situation. And maybe you don't struggle with that. I feel ashamed of the fact that I do, right? Because, my wife doesn't have this problem. Some other people don't have this problem. Maybe it's a genetic thing, but there's at least some of you who are like me. And I find that if I have the ability to go and do the thing that is engaging, that I walk away from the things that are most important to me. And then I feel terrible. I feel like a sucker. I feel like a loser, because here I am with my actions telling the people that are the most important to me in my life that they're not actually important to me, and I need to go and monitor the situation somehow and pull up the feed and go and bury my face in a phone in the next room. And this causes me to ignore the people that I really care about. So this is the basic problem that I have had on an ongoing basis. And for the last month now, though, the Apple Watch has been a major breakthrough, an Apple Watch with cellular. And so if you're not an Apple Watch user, let me explain what it can do. When you have an Apple Watch with its own separate cellular connection, you have an always-on cell phone. You can make and receive calls. You can make and receive messages. And And importantly, also now you can do that with WhatsApp as well. One of the big frustrations for me with many years was I did a lot of messaging on WhatsApp, and they didn't have a native WhatsApp app for the Apple Watch, but now WhatsApp does. And so you can get all your notifications on your watch. You can respond to messages, even if they're coming in on Signal or whatever you use. But you can make and receive phone calls, and you can make and receive text messages and SMS, and you can do that anywhere. But you don't have to have all of the other stuff on it. And you can have a very lightweight communications device that allows you to have communications, but doesn't have all of the other stuff available to you. You don't have Twitter, you don't have YouTube, but you have the productivity things. And so I've talked in the past about what we kind of call the cocaine phone and the kale phone, is that this is one of the strategies that people have talked about. You have your cocaine phone, which has all your time-wasting apps, and you have your kale phone, which has all your productive stuff. And I've done this, but when I've done this, I've always had this problem of the actual phone calls and the actual messages. So for example, on my Kale phone, I want to have something like a language learning app or a reading app, something that I do to read digitally. So I might have that, but then on my cocaine phone, I have the other time-wasting stuff. But it's not all time-wasting. It's usable and important in some contexts. But having two phones is frustrating because you always are not sure which one to take. And if you have different numbers on them, it just doesn't work. The Apple Watch solves those problems because it's the same phone number that comes through from your normal phone. So phone calls come through, messages come through, but it comes through to both your watch and to your phone. So now by having this set up, I have been able to just simply physically remove myself from the device. So at night, when I'm done with my day, I just leave my phone in the office, downstairs, away from my family. It can stay on the charger. I have virtually all the notifications turned off, meaning that, group things, Telegram, all the rest of the stuff, it's all just turned off. That just stays on the phone. None of that stuff gets through to the watch. But if there is somebody that is important to me that's calling me or messaging me, I will get those very few notifications. And so that allows me to leave my phone downstairs. It allows me to go and have dinner with my children and hang out with my children in the evening and not be tempted with the endless scroll, not being tempted to take my dopamine hit from the endless scroll, but actually to be with the people that I love. This has been a big winner for me. The other thing that is important about the Apple Watch is that it still allows me all of my basic productivity tools. And the important ones for me are Apple Calendar, Apple Reminders, and Apple Notes. I have decided to be all in on the Apple stuff. I'll expand on that in a moment. But the beautiful thing about the Apple Watch is it's fully integrated with Apple Calendar, Apple Reminders, and Apple Notes. And I can modify things, I can read things, I can do that. So all of my productivity systems of what I'm supposed to be doing and my reference notes and everything like that is all right there on my watch with a tiny little, 1.5-inch screen, which is perfect. Now, in addition to that, I wear it on my wrist, but there's actually been a couple of interesting set of pieces of gear that people have come up with. I bought this little thing that I'm not using it right now, but it's just basically a little plastic case that you take the strap off of your Apple Watch and you stick the Apple Watch into this little plastic case and it becomes like a little phone. As dumb as that is, that's what it is. It's like the old pocket watch, but it basically just becomes a tiny little phone and this makes it easy to hold in your hand, about like a pack of gum, and you can have your secondary phone. This is a much better solution than all of the light phones that I've seen, all of these other things, because I have the things that I need. I mean, the other one, I guess, would be navigation, right? Is that if you ever try to just switch completely to a dumb phone, what I find is that switching to a dumb phone doesn't work when I need navigation, when I need the ability just to add reminders to my task list, or I need the ability to look something up. So the Apple Watch is a great tool because it still has all of that basic functionality and it's fully integrated, but I can separate myself from the main device. So this means when I walk down to the office in the morning after breakfast, I can get my phone. I can go through all the notifications. I can check all the groups. I can do all the stuff. I can monitor the situation, whatever needs to be done. But I do that with the mobile device that is in my office. And then if I want to leave and I take it with me, I can take it with me, or I can leave it behind. And leaving it behind is really important to gain space. One of the challenges that I have found is that I can't think well when I'm constantly exposed to the never-ending stream of information. And I would guess that your experience is more like this, right? We used to have a lot of time in our lives where we could just relax. We would go and take a shower, and we would think. And sometimes your best ideas come to you in the shower. And you go and take a walk, and you could think. And you could go out and stare at the sunset, and you could think. But then over the years, a lot of us have replaced that, right? We go for a walk and we take a podcast. We go to the shower and you play music. You go and look at the sunset, but then you got to check the scroll. And the problem with this is that we're getting so many constant, never-ending hits of dopamine from that engagement that our brains can never relax. And our work, which is usually hard, often doesn't seem like something that we want to do. And so, but how do you separate yourself from this, right? I need to be in communication. I need to be able to in many cases, I need to be in communication, and I need to be able to mark things down. So if I go for a walk and I want to leave my phone behind, that's fine, except that there are times in which I need to make a call or receive a message and respond to it timely. There are people who are waiting on input from me. But even if it weren't, right? I'm not that important. You're probably not that important. Even if people don't need to get in touch with you, it's also then the friction of dealing with just purely analog solutions. So for years, I've taken a little notebook with me. I take a little notebook and write a little pen. So you're out on your walk and you take a moment, you stop to write a note. The problem is that that's an inferior solution versus recording a voice note. And so I have all my action buttons set up on my watch and my phone to record a voice note. Well, if I have my watch with me, I have the best of those worlds. I can just punch that action button. I can record my voice note for a couple of minutes. It's all going to be transcribed for me. I'll process it later, and I can go on and I can get things out of my head without the friction of writing them down physically when I might not want to expand them in as much detail as I otherwise would. So tip number one is I would suggest to you that a cellular-enabled watch, it may be an Apple Watch if you're in the Apple ecosystem, or some version of a Google Watch, I'm sure also has a similar functionality, is a really, really good move. And that is the best setup to have what we're looking for, which is, when necessary, a really good smartphone that's all set up with all the apps. So when you're traveling, you have everything there with all the apps, but the ability to walk away from it at any time. The integration between those two things is really, really good, and it is better than all of the multi-phone, multi-device things that I have found, because they work together really, really well. So that's tip number one, is I haven't gotten rid of my phone, but by walking away from it, I've been able to regain some clarity and peace of mind. Now, the second thing is also over on the left end of the barbell. So on the left end of the barbell, we talk about the dumb solutions. So let me describe 20 years of productivity systems. I am a sucker for a great productivity system. Ever since I read GTD in college and I conceived this idea of being a massively productive person, I've been a sucker for productivity systems. And I've had them all. I've had all the great ones. I wish I could remember. I used to have this one on my BlackBerry when GTD came out. I think it was called To Do Matrix or something like that. It was just amazing. These systems were so good. And so I did remember the Milk. I've done Todoist. I've done all the productivity systems. And here's the problem for me with productivity systems. I have an intensely creative mind. I have all these ideas of things that I can do, all these ideas of projects I should make and things that if I could just do this, it would be amazing. So whenever I have a productivity system, I fill the thing up so fast. And so I go out, I get excited about some new app, some new system, and I just start filling it up. And I've got all these grand ideas about all the things that I'm going to be able to do. And as I just fill it up, I'm excited. Everything is working well. And I'm making progress. I pass everything through an Eisenhower matrix. I'm really, really clear. And I start working. And the first few days are just amazing because I'm working. And I'm just feeling on top of the world. And I want to go and tell all my friends about this wonderful new app that I found that just has all this amazing functionality. And this is the solution to all your productivity problems. This is a brand new tool that I found. But then, as the days go forward, I wind up putting more and more things into it because I'm so excited about how productive I'm able to be. And I put more and more things into it. And then I wind up being overwhelmed by the amount of things that are on there. So I stop looking at it. I don't want to open the file. I don't want to open it because I'm reminded of all the things I haven't gotten done. And I go through this downward cycle. And so then at the end of, for the first month, it's super great. At the end of the second month, I don't even want to open the thing. And I just do the things I know I need to do. And I let it sit there. And then I have the third month where I just sit there and I do what I know I should do. And I don't write anything down. And then I go out and I say, I come across some new system. Well, this new system's going to solve all my problems. And so I develop and build a new system, start filling it up. And I go through the same 3-month cycle. And this is not new. I'm talking 10 years of doing this. So along the way, you study your behavior. You start to observe, well, that's not working. And so then there have been times where I have sworn off of any kind of digital system. And I say, I'm going to do it all on paper. And so then I go through a practice where I write all my projects out on paper. I start a new notebook. I only do the things that are on paper. And I require myself to rewrite the lists. That way I can delete things, go to some kind of, what's the name of the bullet journal or any of the other versions of it. And then that becomes frustrating because those systems, bullet journal, paper-based things, they require so much care and maintenance that it's so time-consuming that then I go back to the other productivity system. So a few years ago, after this endless self-destructive cycle, I said, that's it. I will never again use another productivity system. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to look at them. I'm not going to watch them. I'm not going to implement them. I'm only going to use Apple Notes, Apple Reminders, and Apple Calendar. That's it. Now, thankfully, this is at a time when Apple's dramatically improving these things. So they're really good now. They have all the basic functionality that you need. You can do Kanban boards. You can do all kinds of stuff in them now. And with those, I was able to commit to that. And so that was just that mental decision made for me a much more stable thing where I'd stop doing the cycle. But it didn't necessarily solve everything. And one of the things that is the insight is that if you are a digital native, or you've been doing stuff digitally for a long time, you and I have forgotten about how powerful other forms of media are. Let me give you the example that I like, which is that of a map. Most of us in our houses, we don't actually have paper maps anymore. Most of us, when we go on a road trip, we don't take an atlas with us. And for many of you, it has been years since you have looked at a paper map. I challenge you, go and get a paper map of your state, of your country, open it, and look at it. If you do that, what you will discover is that the paper map is so much better than your phone screen because you can see everything all at once. The ability to roll out a 24-inch by 36-inch map on your kitchen table and look at it will give you such a better perspective of your state or your city than your dinky little phone screen or your dinky little iPad screen ever could. The map is better. Until it comes to turn-by-turn directions, in which case it's obviously inferior. So my point here that I'm making is that these things are not in conflict. You can appreciate your GPS navigation device for what it's really good at, but don't allow your appreciation of your GPS navigation device to cause you to forget about the value of a map. And I think in our modern world, where we've gotten so device heavy, we've forgotten about the value of paper. Now, I spent a lot of years traveling, and I spent a lot of years basically in the world of kind of makeshift offices, and so I just try to do it with notebooks, and I've used notebooks pretty well. But once I kind of made my most recent move and I got a proper office, I was finally able to rebuild my paper system, which for me has been a massive winner. because the paper system is a map. Now, you probably have done things like whiteboards. I have used whiteboards. If you don't have a big giant whiteboard in your house, you might want to do that. I've done this even with going and getting a sheet of, what's it called, melamine. You can go to Home Depot or whatever and get yourself a 4x8 foot sheet of whiteboard material. And so I've done whiteboards, and whiteboards are a good strategy. If you go to most companies, you'll find that whiteboards are a good strategy. So you might want to do this with whiteboards. I have recently, though, stopped using whiteboards, and I have just switched over to the giant Post-it easel sheets. And I like these better than whiteboards. And so the things I've implemented, number one, is I have a full year calendar on my wall. I, for years, starting probably 7 or 8 years ago, maybe more than that, I started buying the full wall calendars from a company called newyear.net. New is spelled N-E-U, new, N-E-U, newyear.net. And they sell a full 1 year calendar where it's all on one sheet. I'm guessing that thing is 3 foot by 6 foot. And so I have that hanging up. That is incredibly valuable for me able to see the year at a glance. And so what I do is I have that year set up, and then I use lots of little Post-it sticky notes to try to put on there temporary things. So if I have a temporary planning event, a trip I'm planning to take, or an event I'm planning to host, I'm using about 5 or 6 different colors of sticky notes, and I write all the different things out. I put them there while they are uncertain. And then if I have some kind of certain commitment, I need to be in a place on a certain date, or I have a trip that's booked, then I go ahead and I use a Sharpie and I write it in on the calendar so that it's there. And I put in all the important dates, my children's birthdays, and all of those kinds of things. I put all that stuff on the calendar. The ability to look up and see on a calendar with all at once 1 year is really amazing. Your phone screen, your laptop screen does not have any version of this that works. You can look at a week on a screen, and that's helpful, but you cannot look at a year in any useful format. But you can with a 3 foot by 6 foot kind of paper calendar up on the wall. So that's really, really useful. Now, the second thing that has been helpful to me and this was a recent insight, but I've struggled a lot to figure out my content calendar. And, I produce content and I have to plan that stuff out. And over the years, I've done a lot of this electronically, but then a lot of it doesn't work electronically. It just kind of gets behind. And then how do you promote it forward? And then it's super fidgety to sit there and move things forward. And so the second thing that I got was I went to the office supply store and I bought a stack of the At a Glance desktop calendar. You know these things. They go on your desk and they're pretty big. People used to use them more. So I bought about 5 or 6 of them, and then I just tear those off and I thumbtack those to my wall. And so I can have my content calendars there. And I use a similar strategy of sticky notes and of Sharpies, and I write things out when they're done, and I cross off the days. By the way, that's also super powerful, is I cross off all the days so that I can see where I'm at. And this ability just to see everything all at once gives you the power of the map. Integrated with, on a day-to-day basis, I use the electronic calendar. So all my appointments and things are on a day-to-day basis in the electronic calendar, but big picture things are on the map. Now, for goals projects, I use the big Post-it notes. And so you can get the big versions of these. They are, I don't know, what is that, 25 inches by 30 inches. And Post-it sells big white ones. And so if you've never been in a corporate environment to use these, they're expensive. They're about $1 a page at an office supply store. But go to an office supply store and look for the big Post-it easel notes. They're the kind of things that's designed to go on an easel. And you can get those, and they have adhesive on the back. So you can write, and you can take it out and you can slap it up on your wall. So you can turn your entire wall into a series of papers. But so they have white ones, and then they have yellow ones look kind of like a giant yellow legal pad. And I like both of them. I like both of them for different purposes. And then you can also have smaller ones. So we have here, Post-it also sells some of the mini easel pads. Can't see the size. Anyway, they're like half size of the big ones. And the mini easel pads are really great for smaller things. And then Post-it actually sells a lot of smaller ones as well. And so you don't just have to have your tiny Post-it notes. You can have other ones, and I have color-coded ones, and I use that for the projects. So why am I saying this? Well, what happens is, what I've done is I've basically reproduced a version of my electronic system that I have in Apple Reminders with the Post-it notes. So I can look at the wall of my office and I can see all of my projects there. And that this is a duplication of work. This is an inefficiency. So why, Joshua? Why would you not just have it in your electronic calendar? Well, if you just have it in the electronic version, then it's hidden behind the small screen. You can't really get a sense of what all your responsibilities are. But if you put it up on your wall, you can see what all the projects are. You can scratch them off. You can mark them off. And I find that very, very satisfying to actually push forward and say, here's what I have done. Now, this integrates really well with my Apple tools. And so a couple of tools that I have settled on is I use a system in Notes called Forever Notes. If you're an Apple user, then you should check out a thing called Forever Notes, myforevernotes.com. And this is totally free. It's a system that a guy set up to basically organize your Apple Notes. And the power of Apple Notes is that you can have all of the different data that you want to have organized, and it's ubiquitously available across your computer, your phone, and your watch. And if you implement the Forever Notes system, which is basically a system of tags and collections and hubs, and I use the journal system, then you have an overview of what is needed for good quality calendar planning. So if you integrate the Forever Notes journal system, you have a year note, then you have a quarterly note, then you have monthly notes, and that's broken down into your daily notes. And so you can integrate these into your plans, and you can fill them out on the computer where you can link to information, you can store information, but then you can reproduce some of that onto your physical paper-based system. And having the two of these working together seems to have solved a lot of the frustrations I've had in the past with one or the other. I don't worry too much about the electronic notes becoming too voluminous or being lost in the system because I have the paper notes in front of me. And I take pleasure, it's again weird, but hey, let's be honest, I take pleasure in ticking them off in both places. I enjoy clicking done on the electronic system, and then I go over and I give myself a pat on the back, and with my Sharpie I put a big old check mark and I cross it out, and I get a double dopamine hit by having two systems. So there is an inefficiency of it, but there is also a betterness of it. And so by having it at home in my office, I can see everything when I'm there, but then by having the electronic version, I'm still on track at other times of the year as well. And so that system has worked really, really well. So what I would suggest to you is, as suggestion number 2, is that you have a good quality paper system, a good quality map that is a physical map, and recognize that that physical map is better than a GPS at some things. But the GPS is better than the physical map at some things. And so there is no solution. There is no mapping solution that has replaced the power of the physical, I'm talking geographic map, on a screen. That paper map, that paper atlas is still better to be able to look at and see everything than is the map on your screen. But the map on your screen is much better at navigating you on a day-to-day basis. So these are not enemies. They're not enemies. They work really well together, and you should implement both of them. So I used to use various pocket-based notebooks and do those, and those were always frustrating because they didn't give me any of the benefit. They were basically felt like the worst of both worlds. Imagine you're going out with a 3x5 card that you are trying to navigate from. Well, why not just use the phone, right? Because it's 3 inches by 5 inches, and you get the same benefit. But these giant Post-it notes and giant Post-it pads that have all my projects written on them and color coding. I got a bunch of different colors of Sharpie markers and things like that. And the giant calendars everywhere. It makes my wall look cluttered, but it helps me to understand what I'm doing so I can focus. And then I'm getting the best of the phone and the best of what the map can do, the physical paper map of goals and of projects. That's really helpful as well. Now, the third major suggestion is, once you have things laid out in a straightforward way, now how can you integrate kind of the most cutting edge AI systems into what you're doing. And this is what I'm seeking to build right now, especially using agentic AI systems, is that if you understand what you're doing as an individual and you have a clear idea, then you can look at the steps that you've laid out. You can look at the plans and you can say, all right, how can I go ahead and make it so that this task is done by an AI system? But I don't think that you will do a good job of building those systems if they're not clear and basically on paper already. This will be like my 15-year struggle of you're trying to automate something that doesn't need to be done in the first place, right? So people go into AI, and if you don't first have the foundation of your goals and your outlines and those things on the wall in front of you, and then you go and you try to automate it with AI, or you go and try to research a project with AI, I think you're just going to end up in the swamp, because there's no limit as to the good ideas and the good systems and things that the AI can send you. And in order to use that advanced AI capability and those advanced agentic systems, you have to understand what you're doing, and you have to do it on a level at which your brain can handle it. I don't know about you, but I find that I'm frequently now bumping up against the capacity of my brain. And I find myself really frustrated because I think, man, if I was just a little bit smarter, I could keep up with this stuff, and I can't keep up with it. And if we're there in 2026 where I can't keep up with it, I know I'm not going to be able to keep up with it in 2028. And if I can't keep up with it, then I worry a lot about other people who aren't as smart as I am. How are they going to keep up with it? So the key is not to try to keep up with it, but the key is to recognize that my goal is to work within what I can do on a human scale, but then incorporate the better systems as they are available. Years ago, there was a podcast or a writer, a blogger. He disappeared a decade ago. His name was Adam Baker. And he wrote this little book, this little product that I bought years ago called Unautomate Your Finances. And it was really good because the point that he made at that time in kind of the online personal finance blogosphere is that you shouldn't automate a bad system. And this was at the front end of a whole new set of financial software tools and tracking tools and things like that. And what I observed and what he observed is that a lot of people can't handle that stuff. They really don't do well with that. And so you have this strong emphasis over towards, the envelope system, keeping your money in cash envelopes and doing a budget on paper. And what I observed is that when you have people who have bad habits and they try to automate them, they wind up getting into trouble much more quickly. So this is what happens with credit card spending. Still happens today, but it was especially clear then when we were just trying to go over to these new tracking systems. If you are accustomed to spending money unconsciously, and then you switch over to spending money on a credit card so that you can collect airline points, and you do that unconsciously, you very quickly run into a significant problem. You very quickly wind up in debt. Now, if somebody who is always very conscious about money very consciously starts to use a credit card for airline points, that person is probably able to do it in a healthy and straightforward way. But you have to first develop the skills of consciousness. Same thing with budgeting. If you talk to a person who does well financially, has a lot of money, and you say to that person, hey, do you budget? The person's probably going to say, no, I don't really budget. But what you have to ask is, did you budget in the beginning? Did you used to budget? Or if you go to somebody who's really fit, somebody who's just a human specimen and really jacked, and you ask the person, do you count calories? There's a good chance the person will say, no, I don't count calories. But what you have to ask is, did you count calories in the beginning? And what you'll often find is that the person who is really jacked spent years very, very carefully counting calories. And that became so ingrained that now he can look at what he's eating and mentally he knows, okay, this is 350, this is 400, okay, this is a 672 calorie meal, all right, 700 calories, I'm on track. And he'll automatically say no to the extra 100 calories that the untrained person, would say yes to. So he's built these systems, and once you build the system, then you outgrow it and you can go on to the next step. So it's the same with counting calories. It's the same with finances, and it's the same with money management. With time management. And those, of course, are the three budgets that pretty much determine the quality of our life. The budget of our calories, the budget of our money, and the budget of our time. And the productivity system comes down to the budget of our time. And so what I observe is that you can be somebody, and if you're really good and you have a very good productivity system, you're good at going to your to-do lists, you know what you're doing, you're working on your quarterly objectives, and you have an organized brain, then that person can go and can incorporate the extremely productive AI tools to automate things that used to take a lot of time. And now his AI agents can do a lot of that for him. But if you're trying to build AI agents and you have no experience of actually controlling just yourself and doing stuff yourself, you ain't going to make it. It's just not going to work. So you've got to build the tools and the habits. But as you are really good at that, the next level up is to build those AI agents. And that's kind of the far right end of the productivity system. So if you can take your business and you can break the whole thing down into a set of discrete tasks performed by these people, performed on this schedule, and you can lay all that out on Post-it sheets on your wall, then that's the raw material that you need to then turn to an AI agent and say, let's go ahead and let's set up a cron job for these particular things and have them done on this schedule. And you're going to master the tools. But you can't get there if you haven't first solved the paper system, and you're not going to get there if you watch video after video after video of how to be productive, and you sit at the end of 4 hours of it, and you've got 37 downloaded, bookmarked, saved videos and 42, saved Twitter posts that have great ideas, and you have no system for actually getting those things to happen. Better off to take your phone, consume 10 or 15 minutes of content, write down 2 or 3 things you want to do, turn the thing off. The Apple Watch solves that problem. Turn the thing off, sit down with a pencil and paper and notebook and lay out what you're doing, put it up on your wall and execute on it and get it done. And that be all you did for the week. And that's where I want to end what I have to say to you, is that I have learned the hard way that there is only one thing that matters, and that is actual execution, actually doing stuff. It is so easy for me to lie to myself and to lie to you about all the stuff I'm getting done. It is so easy for me to get that hit of dopamine by telling you what I'm going to do. And then I've tricked my brain into not actually doing something because I already got the hit of dopamine from telling you what I'm going to do rather than actually doing it. This happens with to-do lists as well, right? You put something down on a to-do list. And you're like, oh, well, I just created this amazing plan. If I just follow this 102-step plan that's perfect, that AI generated, checklist, then I'll be making $10 million a year with entirely by AI systems with my 0-employee company. Wouldn't that be great? The only people who can do that are the people who are relentlessly effective at execution. I believe that you could build a $10 million company run by AI with no employees if you have a long track record of building lots of companies run by lots of employees and relentlessly executing on other projects and tasks in your life. I don't believe it for an instant, though, that you're the kind of person who just sits around and consumes stuff and you're going to come across some magical video, some magical course that's going to tell you how to build a $10 million AI company with no employees, and you're not going to execute on that if you can't even execute on, the simple tasks of achieving your goals this month. It all comes down to execution. Execution is what counts. It's all execution. And so whatever the system is that you have to build for yourself that results in you being able to have a report at the end of the week that says, this is what got done this week. That's what matters. That's what matters. And the person who at the end of the week can say, here was the large quantity of things I got done, and here is how I identified the most important things to get done, the quality, and chose to do those things. That's the person who makes fast progress. But we simultaneously have these tools that are powerful, incredibly powerful, and yet absolutely destructive to us. Right? You can go to an AI bot right now and you can say, give me a manual on how to build $1 million company. and it'll give you a manual. And if you just follow the steps, it'll work for you. But the problem is, if you don't know how to control your brain, you're going to go to the AI bot and you're going to say, give me the manual on how to build $1 million company. And then you're going to get distracted and you're going to go over and monitor the situation a little bit. And then you're going to go to the second thing and you're going to say, well, give me a manual on how to build this other company. And the week's going to go by and you have nothing to show for it. So figure out how to solve that problem. So in conclusion, those are just kind of 3 basic suggestions that I have for you. Suggestion number 1 is consider getting rid of your phone by adding in something like a cellular enabled Apple Watch. That's been a winner for me because I've got to get away. I got to go on those walks. I got to go and watch the sunset with my wife, and I can't handle it. If the phone's in my pocket, I'll just take a quick look. No, that's so destructive. It sounds so pathetic to admit it, but I'm sure I'm not the only one, right? And so I have to leave the device at home. And so the Apple Watch is the really great way of doing that. I think that's where more and more of us are gonna go to, because it has all of the functionality that we're looking for from some version of a light phone, but we can still have a really high performing primary device ready for us. It's just not always on us. It sits at the office on the charger or whatever your version of that is. So consider something like a cellular enabled smartwatch. Number 2 is don't neglect the value of a paper map, whatever that looks like. It's been a game changer for me. Really, really appreciate it. Recognize that physical paper map does something that the phone screen never can do. But the phone screen, the GPS app, does something the map cannot do. The power comes when you put the 2 together. And that's what that paper piece is, what a lot of us are missing in it. And then on the flip side, we can get over to the digital tools. Check out Forever Notes if you are an Apple user, free piece of software that you can use to set up your notes in a way that works really well. I use the reminders. I'm not going to go through the details, but I use the reminders more for my projects. And so my rule for the way that I interact with these 2 is that I do all my planning and my big picture thinking in Apple Notes. Then on a day-to-day basis, I work on reminders, and I'm very, very quick to add projects, take them away. I don't try to structure everything in reminders. I try to do most of the structuring in notes. But then the day-to-day of what am I supposed to do today, I go to reminders. And number 3 is start to incorporate AI agentic systems. And so that's where, again, in this course, I taught a module on CoWork, taught a module on, we taught about OpenClaw. And so start to look, and if you can get clear on what you're doing and what you're building, so where you can chart it out, then the right end of the barbell is, all right, how do I set this AI system up and schedule a job so that this is done every single time? And that's where our fast advance is going to be. We're living in a moment where high capacity humans are going to be more powerful than have ever been before. And I think that you have the potential to be a high capacity human, but you can't destroy yourself with brain rot. You've got to stay connected with what it means to be a high capacity human. And if you leave, back to that step 1, the reason the phone is so destructive is that if you have ever been somebody who has a high attention span, if you've ever been somebody who could sit down with a difficult, serious book and read for 3 hours straight, ever in your life, then you know what that was like, right? I know what that was like to have that kind of attention span. I also know what it's like where if I have that hard book and I have my phone in my pocket, I know I'm going to do that hard book for 20 or 30 minutes, and then my brain's going to get tired and I'm never going to push through. And I'm just going to go in the other direction and pull out the phone and go do something easy. So that device, right, that you're listening to me on right now is so powerful, and yet it is so destructive. And so you and I, if we're going to be effective in the future, we've got to systematically rebuild our focus skills, systematically rebuild our attention. And we have to build systems to where we can take a very hard book, a very hard task, and we can stay laser-minded focused on it for 2 hours without stopping. And if we can build and execute on that level of focus, we will be the leaders of the future. If you can teach that to your children, be the leaders of the future. It really will work. And the screen is not always the enemy. In some cases, it is. There are a lot of things that the screens are really better at. But at its core, the basic element of being human is being able to think and being able to focus. And so cultivate these skills.